Welcome back to INF People. Today we'll talk a little bit more about the relationship between the INFP and the ISFJ. So I received a question from Hush-Kun. So he asked, could you make a video of how you've resolved some real life conflicts between these types? How to nurture and sustain the relationship, and how to get female ISFJs to understand the deeper things male INFPs are concerned about. So thanks for the question. Great question. So first, let me just start with that last question about how to get female ISFJs to understand the deeper things that male INFPs are concerned about. I don't have the answer to that question. That's something that I'm still trying to figure out myself. So ISFJs are probably they're probably one of the most practical types of all the personality types. They're probably maybe the most, besides maybe the ISTJ. So they're not really going to be too concerned about like the more idea oriented things like the INFPs are. So they're not really thinking so much about big questions like about metaphysics or about the meaning of life or like why are we here. If it doesn't have some kind of practical application, they really don't want to talk about it. The things that they want to talk about are things that they can actually use in their day-to-day lives. So they're dominant introverted sensors. So what they do is try to figure out like the best ways to do things based on past experience and based on like the kind of conversation they have or things like that. Like how can I do this task and do it well. So in also introverted or extroverted intuition is their inferior function. So their intuitive function is on the bottom of their function stack. So they're like one of the types that least like to talk about ideas, like big idea stuff. So yeah, that's something that I'm trying to figure out myself. I can't really answer that one for you. But I mean, just like anything in general, you just have to communicate with each other and try to talk and try to meet each other halfway on things. Like you don't always have to talk about practical things, and she doesn't always have to talk about idea stuff. Just let her know what you're interested in and show an interest in the things that she's interested in. So that's a big thing about communication with INFPs and ISFJs because of the difference between intuitives and sensors. Sometimes communication can be hard. So I would say not to be so worried about like getting them to be concerned with what you're concerned with, but make sure you are also being concerned with what they're concerned with. Because as an INFP, at least me personally, I don't really like to talk about practical stuff. But like I've learned, since most people are sensors, that's just something that you just have to learn to talk about. But sensors don't have that same problem, so they never had to adapt to a lot of other people being intuitive. So they never really practice talking like an intuitive does, the way intuitive types have to kind of practice talking like a sensor in their day-to-day lives, because most of the people around us are sensors. And it's sort of asking a lot for us to expect them to speak to us in a way that intuitives speak to each other, like about idea-oriented things or abstract things like that. So yeah, sorry, I don't really have an answer for that one. So let me just talk about some like potential problems and some possible solutions. So one thing, I haven't made a video in a long time, and I've been planning on making this video to respond to this question for a while, but but I would just so my wife and I just had like a really big argument, and I was just feeling like, well, who am I to even like give advice or talk about this relationship if I'm having this like big fight with my wife right now. But then I was thinking that, well, maybe if I just talk about this, then it can help somebody else out. So like talking about it maybe you can avoid it in your relationship. So something that happens with something about INFPs and ISFJs, we're both very conflict avoidant. We don't like criticism, and we don't like giving people criticism, especially INFPs. ISFJs would be more likely to be not like super critical, but they use it. Their judging function is extroverted, so they'll be more likely to be critical of other people, but they don't like criticism themselves. So something that happens with INFPs and ISFJs when they're together. I was just reading an article a couple days ago about the things that make the different personality types angry. And ISFJ and INFP were two of the top three, like, most likely to suppress their anger. So we are the least likely to get angry, like outwardly, to show that we're angry. It was like ISFP, INFP, and then ISFJ were the top three to not really show their anger outwardly. And that's something that happens in this relationship also. So like my wife and I, we almost never argue or fight. And when we do, it's usually just like sort of like a silent treatment. Like we just don't talk to each other for a little while, and then we just come back, and then we're just fine again. But we don't really like resolve any of the issues. We just both kind of suppress it and just move on, and then that's it. So what happens is, or at least what has happened in my relationship, is that all this stuff, it gets suppressed, and so both people are like on the surface, everything seems fine. Like you know, the relationship is peaceful. You guys are both going about everything and like okay, and everything's fine, or everything seems fine. But all these things are happening that maybe annoy the other person, or things that they don't like, and then so each person is suppressing all these feelings, or all these complaints, or things like that. So then eventually it all comes bubbling to the surface, and it ends up being like this big blowout fight, or this big blowout argument. Instead of like a few small arguments here or there, it's like just stuff coming up from like a year ago, or things like that. Like I've only had, me and my wife and I have been together for like 7 years. We've been married for 6 years, and we've only had like big fights like that like twice, or like 2 or 3 times. But they've been like really big fights, like possible relationship ending fights. And so that's something to be wary of. So what happens is like all this stuff gets repressed, and then one of the two in the relationship has just finally had enough, and then like brings up or starts being like hypercritical. And then since both of the types don't like criticism, then the other person starts firing back with all the things that they've been suppressing. And then it's just like you both are fighting and like bringing things up that happened like maybe a year or two ago. And like just, there's all this stuff that neither of you even realized the other person even cared about, or was like resentful about, or it was even concerned about. And it's just like, what has been going on this whole time? Because it seemed like we were fine, but really you had all these things that were bothering you, and I had all these things that were bothering me, but we just never talked about it because neither of us like conflict, and neither of us like being criticized or really giving criticism to other people. So something that I think the best solution to that, because this is something that I'm still working on in my relationship now, so it's kind of hard for me to really give advice when I haven't really been applying it myself. But this is something that I want to do to start in the future, is that when we have those little arguments, well, not really arguments, well, like if my wife gets mad at me and doesn't want to talk to me for a while, from now on, it would be best if we talked out like exactly what is bothering her, what can I do to make it so that doesn't happen anymore, and then like actually resolve that issue. Because sort of what can happen is that you just both so like somebody might be mad and then not say anything, but as time goes on, they suppress that anger more and more until they're finally just okay again, and then you guys are both okay in the relationship, and like you just go back to being normal. But those things are still there. Those things that were bothering them are still there. They just push them down to down below the surface. And this also has something to do with my wife and I both being Enneagram 9 types. So we're both the peacemaker, and the peacemaker, like the name suggests, likes to have peace. We're not very, we don't like conflict. So on top of being of us, so on top of us being INFP and ISFJ, two of the three types that are the least likely to show anger and to get upset outwardly, we're also both Enneagram 9 types, the main type that seeks peace and harmony within yourself and with the outside world. So we're very unlikely to like confront each other about things that are bothering the other person. So from now on, whenever like there's some kind of conflict between us, we will be talking about it and like hash it out in a way that is like safe, in a safe environment where we're not like fighting or arguing, but just like, okay, just tell me what's going on, and like and the other person needs to be in a mindset like, okay, the criticism that they're giving me, especially the INFP, because INFPs kind of take criticism like it's an attack on their character. So like we need to be in a mindset to listen and not feel like they're attacking our character, to just listen and understand like, okay, this is a concern for my partner, maybe, or what can I do about it? How can I make it? How can we resolve this so that she doesn't have to, or he or she doesn't have to suppress anything, and it doesn't come blowing up later at an unexpected time in an unexpected way, just all of a sudden. So as for the question of how to nurture and sustain the relationship, just like in general, just like I was saying before, it's mostly about communication, and see, and there, so like I was saying in the last video, it's hard to really say like about, to just use the MBTI to talk about relationships, because yes, I'm an INFP and yes, my wife is an ISFJ, but we're also Enneagram 9s. We also have different big 5 personality types and different love languages. Like that's a big thing. I think that if you're really looking about, or really concerned about like relationship advice, you should check out the 5 love languages and have your partner take the test to find out what their love language is and start focusing on that. So for example, my wife, both me and my wife have quality time high as our love language. It's her first one, it's my second one. My first is words of affirmation. I think that might be sort of common for INFPs, but I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments if any INFPs know their love language, and if it were, and what your love languages are, like what the rank is for each one. So that's something that's important. So for us, I would say spending quality time together is a big deal. But for another couple that might be ISFP or ISFJ and INFP, yeah, it might not be quite the same, because maybe the other partner's love language is giving gifts or receiving gifts, or words of affirmation, or anything else, any of the other love languages. So it's hard to give advice just based on the MBTI, but communication would be the biggest thing, just in general. And like we were talking about before, about like getting the ISFJ to care about the deep things that INFPs care about. You just have to learn how to meet each other halfway, and talk and even like sometimes you guys can discuss what you want to discuss. Sometimes you discuss what your partner wants to discuss, and then you guys both will learn how to communicate in the other person's language, another person like sensing intuitive language, and then also learn how to speak your partner's love language. That's probably the most important thing, is learning about each other's love languages. Yeah, I hope this was helpful. Like I said, I'm not like a professional counselor with relationships or anything, and I even feel like I might not be the best person to talk about it anyway, because since I just had a big argument with my wife. But I just hope that someone can learn from my mistakes and avoid these things that I was doing wrong, especially not suppressing all of your problems with each other and then letting them bubble up and boil to the surface eventually, and then causing something that is bigger than it should be. So thanks for watching, everybody. If you have any questions, comment down below. I'll see you guys next time. Peace and love.
Given the choice, don't pass again. Follow my dreams to the very end. This can't be life. This can't be love. It can't be right. It's gotta be wrong. This can't be us. This can't